Hey there, listener. Welcome to the Deep Share Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Rouse, and for the last couple of decades, I've slowly been opening my eyes to a very different world than the one I grew up hearing about. And the more conversations I have with interesting people, the more mystifying this world becomes. So without further ado, let's get deep.
We've got science to celebrate! Demons bliss out! After what, baby? Come on!
There is rebellion in the wind. It will be crushed.
Everything I've said is true. It's real.
Dinosaur fossils? God put those here to test our faith.
A damn lie. I saw them with my own eye.
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
We did illusions, man! None of it is true!
I'm not insane.
This is mass madness, you maniacs! In God's name, you people are the real thing! We are the illusion!
Welcome back to the Deep Share Podcast, and I'd like to welcome back Duane Hayes, returning guest, and returning guest Andy Girard from Go Within to Get Out. It's been a while, man. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. Pretty busy these days. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm good.
How's
All
it
good
going,
over
Andy?
here, man. Happy to be back and really looking forward to Duane's presentation here
Awesome.
tonight.
Hell yeah. And I have to credit Andy with even introducing me to Duane and showing me his work and turning me on to Bulletproof Publishers. And man, it's rocked my world. And we've been waiting for this moment where the three of us could get together and jam on these topics.
Yeah.
And last time Duane and I sat down, he gave one hell of a presentation for my audience for the Future Perfect series that you're familiar with, Andy. And I know that we've been talking, the three of us, for quite a while about Huxley and Leary and everything that led out of that era of time. And yeah, that's what we're going to get into tonight. And I think a lot of people are going to be very interested in what we have to talk about.
Mhm.
So yeah, without any further ado, Duane, let's
Yeah.
introduce the audience to this next part of this saga.
Sure. So I'll just share a screen here. We're going to jump to our website, and just so everybody can see where you got to go to find some of this stuff.
Bulletproofpub.com for the listeners.
Yeah. And then I just want to show people the collections library quickly, because we are providing sources for the material that we are presently in. So we've got some collections of the important books that we've provided for people, so that they can go look at the actual documents themselves. I fully encourage everybody to do those kinds of things. So we've got Walter Lippmann and all of his important literature. And then we're going to add some Huxley, because look at that. See?
Oh, there it is.
That is my man, Jan Soleil, web designer. Shout out to this guy. He's just been huge. He just finished cooking dinner for his kids, and it looks like he found some time to throw this in before the show. So
Fantastic.
we'll be able to steer you guys into here, so you can start reading The Doors of Perception, The Perennial Philosophy, Brave New World, and start pulling the sources out for yourself, because these three books really influence the world in a huge way, and we're going to show you how influential Huxley is. A lot of people know that he's involved in MK Ultra, and they know that he wrote Brave New World, and if you're in the mainstream, you believe that he was just a prognosticator and he could predict the future. But what we're going to show here tonight is that he was really the architect behind all of it. And I've already got a ton of backlash from Huxley fans. And for those people, I just want to say, hey, we're just offering the information. We are just providing the story as unbiased as we can, because we want everybody to, what we're trying to do is just lay it out and have everybody consider, because it's a trait of the wise to be able to consider something without accepting it. So, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. We're obviously trying to show his involvement is much deeper, but there's a lot of Huxley fans. There's a lot of New Age fans and people that are into that whole genre. And I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from anything. I'm just telling you a story. So,
well, yeah, I think the important thing to keep in mind throughout these talks is that there are a lot of nuances to this. I mean, there's like I think we brought this up the first time around. These types of people, these power hungry parasites, whatever, they always kind of take what's true or what's actually helpful and they use it to their own advantage. So a lot of people will throw the baby out with the bathwater, even to have an argument or a conversation with you about this. I can only imagine it's that they're holding dear to all the amazing wisdom that they did grab from doors of perception about themselves, about the world, about reality. I can totally get down with that, but that's not all there is to it. And I think that's what we're kind of trying to drive at here, right?
Yep, and I would say it's the classic example of 80% truth and 20% not truth, and the 20% that isn't true is very important to understand.
Yes.
So we're going to start with Exhilarator because there's four articles that I've put out the last month and a half or so, and we've gone through the Future Perfect 1 and Future Perfect 2, and we're showing that there's a lineage, there's a nepotism, so it's a familial line that we're following. We've already showed, Gregory Bateson and his father, and then Norbert Wiener and his father Leo, and how these guys seem to be groomed, and it goes back to even before their fathers into the mid 1800s. You start following this, and you start stumbling into the same patterns, the same institutions. Royal Society has been around for a long time, and most of the roads lead back to there. So
The
the next article to consider here, I mean, all of these can be looked at as separate entities of themselves. I wrote them in that way, so it doesn't really have an order. You can read them all and you'll still get the concept, but the way that I wrote it and the sequence that I wrote it, it's probably best to do the Future Perfects 2 because it lays down some history there.
Right.
And then on top of that history comes the Exhilarator 30 years later, the same decade as the Macy conferences. All of these exiles that wrote literature come over from the Weimar and they land in Los Angeles. So that's what Exhilarator means. It's just literature written while these guys are in exile.
Interesting.
So, and the one thing that really is important for us at Bulletproof and the history of propaganda is the things that we can't see. Okay, so we can all see Huxley and the intangibles, but why I put Marx and Hegel and Freud here as if they're like wisps and clouds is because those things, the philosophies, the theologies, we don't really see. So once people can identify those kinds of things in the language, it becomes easier to see how they're steering us. So I just talked to my wife one night when I was writing this, and I said to her, I said, what is the likelihood that Aldous Huxley actually picked up some of these guys and drove them to wherever they were going? Because a lot of these guys, well, they all intermingle. They're all going to each other's houses. And I'm going to try to stay out of our most recent research because I've got an article coming out in the next couple days that takes us a little further. So I'll try to stay out of that, but we are identifying that these people are all living in the Pacific Palisades, in the Laurel Canyon, in the hills of Los Angeles. They're not far from each other.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that Thomas Mann and Aldous Huxley lived within 100 feet of each other, and they were walking their dogs. The two families often hung out. When Huxley left Los Angeles, all of his personal staff that was taking care of him at his house, they all went over to work with Thomas Mann. So there's a much deeper relationship going on here. And for everybody that wants to know, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to reveal this, but that is my pen name, Diego Garcia.
Oh,
so,
cool.
I just love the name.
Diego Garcia.
I find I get more honest critique of my work when they don't think that it was written by me. So I appreciate
by just
that.
some white guy.
Yeah, I appreciate the honest critique of my work far more than I do when somebody says, that's just great. I find that I can learn more that way. So I guess we just start right here, and I'm going to try to, be as concise as I can.
Well,
If
that's
you
all
guys
right.
have
And
any,
Andy, by the way, jump in whenever you feel
Yeah.
you got something to throw
Yeah,
in
I'm
too.
just I'm just kind of observing. I want to throw some stuff in. Hopefully, I'll just kind of go with it.
Hell
yeah,
yeah, man.
perfect segue because I was just going to say that at any time you guys want to stop me, just stop me and we can work our way through.
Cool.
So these guys land in Los Angeles. It's all part of this Emergency Committee in Aid of Displaced Foreign Scholars program. So this is Rockefeller funded, but there's probably 100 people that were funding this, but the major ones were Rockefeller, Hiram, Halley, and the Rosenwald Fund. And I provide a picture here down as we go. You'll see that how these guys all intermingle. So having
I see
displayed,
Flexner there. That's the such
Yep.
so important now.
Yep.
That name, given what we've experienced the last couple years, taking over the allopathic or taking over the homeopathic system, and
Are you talking about that the way they're trying to like make us regulate everything that we do like herbally or something like that?
yeah, the Rockefellers basically. I don't know, Duane, if your work gets into the Flexner report, but how they took over the universities, the medical schools. They were actually teaching homeopathic remedies at the time, and then Rockefeller unleashes Flexner into the world, and next thing you know, homeopathic remedies are woo woo. Totally
Yes,
replaced with the petroleum-based system and modern pharmaceuticals. Here we go, right?
Yep, exactly. There's the Flexner brothers. There's three of them. They kind of branch off into society in different areas. And our modern medical industry really is founded on the Flexner report. That is absolutely true. And yep, he is involved here. So another guy that maybe nobody really knows, there's two guys here. Stephen Duggan, he's considered the apostle of internationalism, and Alvin Saunders Johnson, he's the co-founder of the New School for Social Research with James Harvey Robinson and Charles Beard. These are two other major figures in the progressive movement. So we're going to get into maybe some of that too. How the progressive movement was used through the two pillars, the efficiency movement and the preparedness movement.
It's
And
all
they
these
really
little
used that.
buzzwords. They've always used the buzzwords since the
Yeah.
beginning of the 20th century, as we've seen from the last episode, all the way through.
Yeah, and so you can see Felix Warburg there too,
Yeah.
widely known as the father of the Fed. And Alan Gregg, he's really the Rockefeller connection. So I've got some incredible footage actually of these guys having a barbecue at this guy's house, the guy with the two dogs, Hiram Halley.
Look at this
He's a
stooge.
major funder, and Rockefeller matches everything that everybody else donates. The Rockefeller Fund matches it all.
Jeez.
So we've got Alfred E. Cohen, Bernard Flexner, Fred Stein, and Stephen Duggan, and they form this nucleus. And Hiram Halley does a large amount of the funding. And I've got this incredible video of the university in exile, everybody that's working there at Columbia at their annual barbecue. So
Wow.
we're going to show that. We're going to get there. It's just some amazing footage, but it really it's damning. It shows that they're all hanging out. And
To me, this looks like another paperclip, like a different form of
Yes.
Operation Paperclip. Like just instead of like a secret operation, you're just putting it right out in the open, calling it something polite. Emergency Committee in the Aid of Displaced Foreign Scholars.
Yep.
Yeah,
And there's several of these groups that
Sounds
sound
great,
like-
doesn't it?
it
Yeah.
does.
Sounds
It sounds
actually
very
great.
helpful. I'm
Just
sure
like
they'll help
sustainability.
build back better.
Just like Build Back Better, just like sustainability,
Oh yeah.
these buzzwords that they use.
All these real truthful things that we want and good things for the most part, that those are the buzzwords that they like to steal and use.
Black Lives Matter, right? Who's gonna
Right.
disagree?
Like, who the
with-
fuck is supposed to argue with
Who's
that?
gonna
right?
disagree with the statement, right?
Right. And so they shape these arguments and frame them. So
Came
you have
from
to
these
be,
minds, right, Duane? Came from
yeah,
these kinds of minds right here.
Yep.
Psychology.
yeah, exactly. And so you were saying it's something like paperclip. That is exactly what's going on. But it's an infiltration of all aspects of society. So if everybody can go back into one of my older articles about the Stanford Research Institute and the Changing Images of Man study that they did that started in the 70s and ended in the 80s, we see this real rise in pharmacological. All of a sudden, everybody's on 4 or 5 drugs. This is right after all of this. That report is inspired by both Huxley's, Joseph Campbell, The Hero with a Thousand
Oh
Faces, or The Hero's Journey. Yes, see, and
no, damn it.
he's involved deeply, right? And Huxley, and both Huxleys are cited, as are B.F. Skinner and all of these behaviorists. They figure out, they present all of the ways that they figure are best to control society, and they even get into hypnotism and magical and mythical realms.
hmm
And I invite everybody to go read that. We go in depth, and I think we even provide the actual document.
And this is the one on Stanford.
Yeah,
I think
That
I've
made
read it.
me
I think I'll go back and reread it.
that
yeah,
made me think
because
about I just did a web search on your website, but those names, Joseph Campbell and Huxley, made me think about Esalen, the Esalen Institute.
Yes.
Because
Yep.
I was doing like some more research recently in preparation for this, because I wanted to see how some of your research tied in with that, because it gets into modern day with Joe Rogan and all of the types of guests that go on his show.
the intellectual dark web.
The intellectual dark web, yeah.
Intellectual gatekeepers.
Oh, they are
Yeah.
major gatekeepers for sure.
So Campbell and Dick Price founded Esalen in 1962 with influence from Huxley and funds from Rockefeller, Carnegie, Packard, Ford.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of wanted to bring that angle. But I wasn't sure if you were gonna kind of touch on that, but you just mentioned Joseph Campbell, so I figured I'd throw that in there. But keep going.
Yeah, I didn't even make the Esselin and Campbell connection. I just like the hero's journey and some of his work, you know.
Yeah.
I did not know that he was involved in the creation of Esalen, and I did not know that Rockefeller funded that. But we definitely get into the creation of Esalen because Huxley inspires it all.
Oh yeah.
So
Big time.
here
It's
is
a
an incredible.
huge linchpin in this whole thing,
It is.
Esalen.
It is. And so this is an incredible photo here that I just uncovered a while back. And this is them at the Waldorf Astoria after they've all been emigrated back to the United States. And what we see here at the head of the table is Felix Frankfurter, Isaiah Bowman, and Alvin Saunders Johnson. And they're at the head of the table right at the mic. And I never knew that there was a connection between Bowman and Frankfurter. But I was amazed to see this photo. We have Thomas and Heinrich Mann right front and center. So you see this is all of these 303 scholars. It actually branches out even more into other areas than just, scholars and intellects. It gets into all kinds of other things too. So they're funding all of these guys coming over, and it so resembles Operation Paperclip.
Yeah.
And
you said it's 303 scholars?
Officially, originally, that is
Of course.
that is what happened. But then they branched out and started bringing everybody that they could. And the Exiliterator, as we get into it, they help also to bring these people because they're friends of theirs.
Right.
So we got to introduce.
Real quick, just another name to throw at you, Duane, before I forget. Barbara Marx Hubbard. Does any of your work get into her?
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right. Andy, how about you? Are you familiar with Barbara Marx Hubbard?
No. Is any relation or connection to L. Ron? L. Ron Hubbard?
Well, no connection there. That's just a really odd coincidence, actually. But
Okay.
no, she had a lot to do with like the new age psychedelic approach to everything. And
Okay.
yeah, she's in all these very positive. I think one of her, I can't remember the names, but it was like the Positive Foundation or the all these very. I think, man, I wish I could think of them right now, but I'll keep looking. You go ahead, Duane. Sorry.
Yeah, and the other thing there too with the last name Hubbard,
Mm.
Al Hubbard, the Johnny Appleseed of LSD. He wasn't just an agent for the United States or Canada. He was playing multiple countries
Mm.
there, and so he was based out of Vancouver, and he was doing LSD studies on people out of in New Westminster. It was called the Hollywood Hospital, and
Mhm.
actually some big names went there, actors at the time, and used LSD for various reasons.
Holy fuck, dude. Okay, I just have to mention this because I looked up Barbara Marx Hubbard. So, in case I found anything that could relate to this, I could bring it up. It relates to something entirely different. In her youth, she attended the Dalton School in New York City. Do you guys know why that's significant?
I do not.
The the headmaster for a time was a man named Donald Barr, father of former
Bill Barr.
former whatever the hell he was. I can't remember.
William Barr,
Yeah, William Barr, Bill Barr.
right?
And
King
and
of the cover up right there. Covered
yes,
up Iran Contra,
right.
covered
And
up Epstein, covered
that's
up
the thing. The Epstein connection is that his father, Donald, allegedly might have been the one that hired Epstein as a college dropout to teach math and physics at the Dalton School while he was the dean. And while he was the dean, he wrote Space Relations, all about alien child rape, slavery, and shit on another planet.
Wow.
Yeah.
More stuff I did not know.
And his second book was about after a collapse and the clandestine power grab that takes place. So yeah, fun connections all around. The Dalton School, wonderful.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and that's what we're finding too, that when you start reading their literature, it's all there.
It's everywhere.
Nobody reads their literature. Who's going to read Max Horkheimer's Dialectic of Enlightenment? But this really lays out what's going on. It's a tough read. I've tried to read it a couple times, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of the language because these guys didn't speak any English, and so a lot of it is translated. So maybe this is the first time that people are being introduced to these exhilarator's, and these
That's
are two
great.
guys. Max Horkheimer, the top guy there in glasses, the bald dude, looks like Kojak kind of, and then Theodore Adorno. These are both the inventors of critical theory. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter and all of this neoliberalism that's going on, this is an extension of progressivism and an extension of Theodore Adorno's critical theory. And you can see in a picture what critical theory really means there. He's just got his thumbs down.
exiled from Germany, right? Is what
Yep.
I'm.
Yep, they come from the Frankfurt School. Horkheimer is the director. Adorno ends up being the director when he goes back in the 50s. So they're key guys.
I wonder how much they were involved with subverting the German population before that historical event.
Right. So
Right.
then,
Interesting for
I mean,
me.
we wanted their scientists for particular reasons. We wanted their psychologists for particular reasons too.
yep. And that is where our research is now because they are very influential in the Weimar Republic. A lot of these connections. And so if anybody knows about the Weimar, it was a society that looks a lot like ours right now, just sort of degrading and just further and further absurdities.
Yep.
Right.
Falling apart from the inside
Yeah,
out.
yeah, and we see the same thing there. And I'll leave it at that for now. Okay, so because we first have to work through this stuff. Because if we were just to sort of jump ahead, there's going to be a lot of incredulity. But I want to sort of prove our steps along the way in a deductive manner, so people can.
That's what
I
we're
think
here to do, man.
There are so
Absolutely.
many people right now with so many questions about where we're at and what's going on, and so that's logic. who, what, why, where, when you start asking those questions. And that's what we want to see people doing. And so what we've done, and really what our mission is to be a place where people can land, can start to figure out what true history is, or at least to the best that we can determine through primary source material. And then they can start seeing themselves in their true and proper place. Okay, this is Plato talked about this in Republic, that we must drag the ignorant up the steep and rugged ascent into the light of the truth, so that they can consider themselves in their true light, not mere reflections in the water. And I think this is what he was talking about.
Absolutely.
So this all goes back to Columbia. The head of Columbia at the time, he and Horkheimer make a plan. Horkheimer comes over. They actually take this critical theory Marxist school from Frankfurt and install it into Columbia. Okay, now Columbia is an Ivy League, but it's even more than that, because it has a teacher's school. So they're not only just teaching the students, but they're teaching the teachers how to teach. So this is, again, we're framing information. Just like a library or a book is framed, same thing. So Charles Beard is a major progressive, as is James Harvey Robinson. These two are super close to James T. Shotwell, who's a leader of the inquiry. If you've read the Future Perfect one, you'll be familiar with him.
Yep.
So
the new school, there's that word, right?
Yeah.
We talked about that in part 1.
Yep. So they become two, or they become one. The two become one. We've already established the new school for social research through Beard and Harvey Robinson, and it's about 15 years later that the university in exile comes, and this is Max Horkheimer and the Frankfurt School. That's what they call it. It's the university in exile. So they join forces. And so when we talk about social research, you're going to see that phrase all the time. And what that is they are deep into research on us. And then when you hear the phrase applied science, that is when they've taken that information that they've gathered and now applying it, infusing it into society. So we see some of the guys here that are involved in the Frankfurt School, and we can start to see how they branch out. Herbert Marcuse, he's, top 3 guy at the Frankfurt School. He ends up
Abby
going
Hoffman.
to teach. Yes. So he's teaching at Brandeis University of all places at first. And he's teaching these social radicals. And he is considered by even the mainstream as the father of the New Left. He was quoted as saying the grandfather maybe of the New Left.
Mm.
And we have Kurt Lewin, or Kurt
name.
Levine is how we pronounce it. So he's a modern pioneer in social organization and applied psychology, considered the founder of social psychology. And so he's from Germany, and he comes over here and starts influencing major. All of these guys are influencing the intellectual, scholarly level of society. And that's really the 20%. Noam Chomsky talks about the 20% that manage, and that's the doctors and all that. That's really who they're influencing here, because that is the most important demographic to influence, because they're then going to influence and manage the rest of the society. So that's why we see when we talk to doctors that they're just repeaters and regurgitators, and not really a lot of logic is flowing there. Nothing personal against any doctors, but this is what I'm finding.
No, you find their corners and their limits constantly when you try to talk to them for like a human being in an appointment anyway.
And this goes back to Andy's point about the origins of the medical industry and how they kind of flipped it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've also got Eric Fromm, and he's a Zionist.
The incentive structures too, right? I mean, it's hard for them to have a conversation when they have $250,000 in debt and they're financially incentivized to give vaccines, pharmaceuticals, surgeries, radiation, chemo. Yep. How are they going to give anything other than that? I mean, they're financially incentivized to give these things by insurance companies, by their overlords, the people they report to. It's not like I always say, it's not like these people are bad. They don't have
Yeah.
bad intentions, and they don't really, I don't think they deliberately want to harm anybody, but the system that they operate in.
No, you
is-
think about like a whole lifetime of schooling dedicated to a paradigm, and then you have people coming in trying to say that, you know, there's other options, but your paradigm says that it's the best and only option. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's hard to break through that and see otherwise.
So that's the overarching sort of veil when we want to talk brainwashing. That's like the overarching level, and there's multiple levels down.
Mm-hmm.
It's a trap, really.
It-
They've set up an amazing trap for,
Absolutely
I mean,
genius.
so many different institutions and careers and, you know, ideas. It's like they've just trapped us, you know,
Yeah,
in so
man.
many ways. It's a
Yep.
brilliant,
It is
unfortunately.
diabolical, right?
It is
Like, and it
absolutely
goes
brilliant.
back to Duane, you and I were talking about like the liberal arts, right? They've got us in every direction. We talk about, you know, fellow podcaster Charlie Robinson wrote The Octopus of Global Control, right? It's in every direction they've got us, and it's because of that aspect, that liberal arts. They gathered all of those people together that knew a little bit of everything. So that way they could literally just from the top down and outward just grab everything and everybody. It's unbelievable what they've done. It is. It's fucking
Yep.
brilliantly diabolical.
Yeah. So when you talk about the intelligent creatives and how they control, you know, rock stars and all of that, they're doing the same there too.
Yeah, every industry you look at.
The liberal arts, this is how they created our caste system. It's not necessarily a wealth gap, it was a knowledge gap that created that wealth gap. And it's really the coveting of the liberal arts and only giving it to those that they want, so that, you know, the difference between a liberal arts degree and any other degree is that, you know, it gives you an opportunity to live a life instead of make a living. So you can actually walk the earth and make a living without having any tools because of your perspective on the world and how well you understand how it actually works. So this is why Ivy League is so important. We talk about the prestige of Harvard, but prestige really means to trick or fool. And that's what we see here, is that it's all just a big trick. And you know, if you think about when you were back in high school, you were already being identified, and the ones that were willing to regurgitate, they were being pulled out of there, given scholarships, and then
Yep.
they get steered into being that 20% that are managing. So now,
I did it. I worked in corporations for 12 years. So
That's right.
I was a good little slave. I always it was something deep down that I didn't like about school, but I always like studied hard and got good grades and stayed after. I went to, you know, the University of Connecticut, studied finance. I studied finance, and I didn't know that the Federal Reserve was not federal.
yeah,
I paid $40,000 a year to get a finance degree, and I didn't know that the Federal Reserve was a private bank. I mean, that says a lot, doesn't it?
Did you have trouble like talking to, you know, people in your own field about that when you discovered it?
It wasn't, I was pretty much, this was a recent, you know, probably in the last
Okay.
4 or 5 years. And I try to explain that to some people like at work as a corporate accountant, you know, for Dell EMC, one of the largest tech firms in the world. And then CVS, excuse me, worked for CVS for a few years, got bullied out of there because I wouldn't get vaccinated. But yeah, definitely people are like, what do you mean it's not federal? I'm like, yeah, oh, it's a private bank.
Yeah.
And it's a debt-based slavery system. I said, and those pieces of paper in your pocket mean nothing. And it's insane. And people would look at me like I'm insane.
Right, of
But
course.
the fact that I was studying finance and didn't know anything about the Federal Reserve other than that they, you know, they set the interest rates up and down, blah, 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 this bullshit.
Yeah, there's
you
always
know?
a cover story. That's
But-
that's another part of the genius, right?
I mean, college is literally the biggest lie I've ever bought, and it's the biggest fraud that you could ever imagine. This is how I learn and make sense of my reality. It's my personal experience in it, right?
Right.
So I always blend my own personal life and story with it because this is how I learn. I mean, in college, you're a professional drunk, and every guy that I knew in college was a drunk,
Oh
and
yeah.
he chased women, and he was doing drugs, and then after 4 years of that consistent debauchery and degeneracy and like just base level animalistic thinking and behavior, you think that you're actually educated and more intelligent than other people.
Mhm.
And
That is
prepared
the
for the real world.
viewpoint you leave with. You leave
Right.
with that viewpoint and that sort of supremacist sort of thinking.
Right.
And it couldn't be further from the truth or the complete and total opposite of reality.
Yeah,
It's
because
like,
they've
so,
been told that they are the best and brightest.
And
yeah,
you know, I always talk about
Yeah.
like Russian dolls, man. And you know, Dwayne's work has thrown me for a loop and kind of shown me another level to the Matryoshka because like, you know, I've always known that you know public school was controlled and all that, right? But when you look at it the way this information presents it all, the school system is literally not how things were always done at all. And it's just like this thing that has infected Western civilization. It's
Mhm.
insane.
And
And
that's
not
what
even
we're,
just Western, it's infected the whole world.
yeah,
Crazy.
because it's a worldview that they wanted. This is literally what they wanted to accomplish at the Paris Peace Conference was to make a world that was liberal minded
Right.
and under an Anglo-American Atlanticist worldview.
Mm,
So when you're underneath that, then you believe that internationalism, this move away from material force of arms and into this moral international law. Everybody believed at the time that this was the right way to go because the Great War was just horrific.
right.
And I think that honestly that this is part of the dialectic is these wars really push people to take these perspectives. Like it's really pacifists that created the League of Nations.
Right.
It wasn't warmongers. It's a bunch of pacifists that you wouldn't expect. A bunch of women, in fact, right? Like we've shown that these groups are the ones that are involved. So
So shit, the the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
yeah, and we got to be careful as to sort of what policies that we take forward. And this is an important part too. We need to identify specifically the institutions that are trouble and remove them.
Right.
Well, it's not the system necessarily, but it is systemic.
Mm,
So, you know, anything that has research institute attached to it, in my personal opinion, needs to
run,
be removed, and
run.
a lot of our issues would be gone.
yeah, I
So,
mean, demonic possession's a great metaphor for it because like there's a person in there. Like I don't know about the Constitution necessarily, but like in generally speaking, like there's a way of life that we could all adhere to, but it's kind of been infected with like a parasite almost.
mhm. And it's hard to see,
Oh yeah, because it
right?
mimics
Like
everything.
we're talking about, it's hard to see. You just get wrapped up in this current, and this is really progressivism. We have no time for questions of the past. You know, there's really
Right.
very little talk about the past, just today and the future.
Right. And it's literally like on an individual basis. I'm sure both of you guys can relate. On an individual basis, that's the way, if a person's living that way, it's always destructive. And you see it in friends and
Mhm.
family and people you know, and it's like, oh, that person's being destructive because they're not considering critically what they're doing or where they are, who they are, and they're just plowing on forward. And you look around, that's literally what the whole world is going that direction.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, there's really never been a public debate about climate change and
Mm,
several other things because they're going to just push people to assume that what, you know, the experts are saying is true, and there's really no time to debate it. And, you know, we get called old guys that are out of touch when we even bring up the argument.
Right.
So this is really the trick of progressivism.
So anyway,
And
let's get back on track. We got this
Yeah.
ugly mug staring us down.
Yeah.
The man that introduced and helped so many, in me included, to be honest, into like the psychedelic panic and freak out of what it all meant. I mean,
Yeah. So this is his
Aldous
house
Huxley.
here. This is actually Huxley's house here. So he's just below the Hollywood sign,
How
and
about
that place
that?
still exists today. They have, big get-togethers on anniversaries and specific dates there. You can go on the internet and see. So this is another interesting part that I wanted to put in the article, that they considered Santa Monica, or for that matter, Los Angeles in its entirety, a suburb of Hollywood rather than the other way around. This is, their critical analysis of Western life. So here's another one, Bertolt Brecht, and we're really just going to introduce these people. It's the next article we get into how they did it.
Okay.
But it's important that we're in this grammar stage. We want to get to know the names of the people, places, and things. And then the
Yes.
next article, we get into the specifics of what books they wrote and the plot lines and how they all sort of work together and nudge society in the direction that they want. So here he is from 1940, a census that shows that, it's pretty prolific. They're coming into Los Angeles at a pretty good
Whoa.
rate, and it's this area here that we
Mhm.
really concentrate on specifically.
My God, where's Laurel
Oh.
Canyon?
Yeah, Laurel Canyon is
I'm trying to find it.
right in
There's
here.
Linwood. Okay.
Okay, and Huxley's up here
Yeah.
underneath the Hollywood sign, and then literally all the way down Sunset Boulevard to the Villa Aurora, which is down here in Pacific Palisades.
Mm-hmm.
You can see they're littered all the way along there. So this is really what gave me the idea that I wonder if Huxley's driving and picking up all of these guys on their way to the Villa Aurora.
Right.
That
Heading to
is
the cabin.
that is extensive.
That's unreal.
They
Yeah.
have that place literally cornered from
Mhm.
every side.
And,
Like, how
and
many
so
names in here have connections to the Committee of 300, Club of
Right.
Rome?
right.
Lord knows what else.
So I'm not going to suggest anything right now. I mean, we can get into
No, no.
speculation, but I'm starting to see where this is going back into the past, and it is
Yeah.
profound, man. We feel like we are standing at a real incredible place in history. I'm not sure why we've been left to uncover all of this, but Jan and I have talks right now, and we're just like blown away that we've been given this opportunity to reveal all this, to show everybody, because I there's no way you can make an argument, as far as I'm concerned, that
No.
this is just by coincidence, any of this.
And it's
So
great to show the tactics all
Yeah.
the way through, and we can visibly see them so obviously now out in the public that it's almost like once you go through this research, there's no doubt at all making the connections.
Yep. This is what we try to do, is eliminate all excuses.
Yes.
And we do that through primary source material, so that it's not our opinion, it's what's been presented as best as we can determine. So here's the Villa Aurora. This was a political salon. So for those that aren't familiar with that term, this comes out of the French Revolution, and it's really, and it's the same energies actually that foment the French Revolution that are here. And this place is owned by Leon and Marta Feuchtwanger, and his private library includes primary sources of all of the major French revolutionaries.
Huh,
So you start to look,
interesting.
and so they donated everything that he had to USC. And now there's a Feuchtwanger library, and they do fellowships out of here. So you can see the continuation, the ominous continuity that Kevin Cole talks about, how they continue this invisible thread of school of thought through all the way to today, still using the same buildings. And they really, all of these people admire Feuchtwanger and Thomas Mann and they really credit them with the world that we have today.
So let me ask a dumb question real quick, because some people out there maybe have the same dumb question.
Mhm.
I was going to college my first year as a quote unquote liberal arts major, right? It's like one of the most popular majors that you can get into pretty much across the board. I went to for this, that was at a community college, but it was like we're clearly talking about two separate things when it comes to like the hand-picked, curated liberal arts progressives that we're talking about. Where's the distinction there? Is it just that they handpick people kind of that follow that trajectory and make themselves known? Like, how does that work? Is it the same thing? Is it kind of two different levels?
Well, I would say that the education system in its entirety is a filter system,
Okay.
and the cream rises to the crop, and they're not necessarily the smartest. They've they believe that the best way to get marks is to remember everything and regurgitate it. And really, we know that that's what education is really about,
Mm-hmm.
is those that uh, are able to remember everything and put it down the way that they want it will become those that they covet. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
vetting system really for them. And I was a roomer in grade 12, so I was never on their radar.
Mm-hmm.
But you when I was in grade 11, I remember, and maybe you guys had this too, where we had to go in and fill out a questionnaire, and they put all of that information into a computer, and it came out and said what you were best suited for
Yeah.
after high school. Now, this is a major part of it, and the answer that came out for me was a garbage man. You know, so they this is a major part where they can identify those that are going to benefit them, and they start offering scholarships. And so this is uh yeah, I mean, they steer everybody. They take the brightest ones and take them to the Ivy Leagues and
Mm-hmm.
covet them, turn them around, and use them um to against their own self-interest really,
Yeah.
and they just don't know. So
Oh,
when you
yeah.
a lot of these people have no idea what they're doing. So we talk about the evil of the world. It's really, it's just they're being manipulated, and they honestly feel as if they are doing the world a good.
Yeah. It's unconscious.
I use
So
I use the term unwitting accomplice
right, right.
Yes.
because well, I stole it from They Live, that
Fuck yeah.
that interruption, the guy who interrupts the TV program in the homeless shelter, and that guy, the homeless guy's like,
We are their unwitting accomplices.
Yeah.
It's true though. It's so dead on, like
It's so smart.
what you were just talking about, because
We're doing
again,
all their work.
my example,
Yep.
I'm doing corporate accounting for Dell EMC. They got contracts with Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin. They make bombs, and we're supporting it. I'm supporting it. I do corporate finance for CVS. They're making drugs that kill people, including people that I love. It's not
Mhm.
that I have some evil plan, or these accountants have some evil, but we're involved in it. We're wrapped up in it. There's very few opportunities. They've engineered that into our society as well. Gutted small towns. I'm from a really small town. Is absolutely gutted. There's nothing there. 30% of the people in our town get their groceries from a gas station. It's food desert. It's unwitting accomplice, I think, is probably one of the best terms to kind of show people how we're all involved, and
Yeah.
that's what makes it so difficult to, you know, I mean, yeah, you can certainly point to these folks as having engineered all this, but who's really doing this, who's carrying it out, who's making it come true? It's the software engineers and the developers and the accountants and the people making these companies go, and these companies that are wreaking havoc on the earth and damaging our earth and damaging our communities with harmful medications and harmful
Mhm.
vaccines that these companies have no liability for.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
we're really tied up in it, but
yeah, and we're talking degrees between implicit and complicit,
that's right.
Yeah.
and that's where you're going to find everybody. And so we're trying to identify those complicit more so.
It almost feels like
Because,
they have it set up so we will be complicit. Like, well, you did it all. Like, what?
yeah,
You did all our work for us, you know? Like the whole
yeah,
liberal arts thing. It's kind of when I like checked off liberal arts when I applied, it was like that's the major you choose when you don't know what you want to do. Because of course there's a huge part of our society that just gets bombarded and doesn't know what the hell to do and doesn't know what opportunities they have, you know what I mean?
yep. And liberal arts is really the the best knowledge and
So,
education you can get.
true, right. That's that
Everything
dialectic.
else,
Yeah.
everything else stems from it because through the liberal arts you learn how to communicate through grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and
Right.
so you're afforded a lot more uh, breadth of knowledge than just a doctor that's in a specific industry. So you can
Right.
really see it once you really uh, start getting an understanding of the liberal arts. You really start to see the limitations of doctors and lawyers and those people that you used to respect in the old world.
Right.
So here we have Esalen.
There it is.
There we
Okay,
go.
and here we're getting into Huxley and his connections into MK Ultra. Okay, and Aldous Huxley's at these political salons. So they're all visiting the Villa Aurora with Theodore Adorno, Horkheimer, and all of these escapees from Weimar.
Hmm.
And so you see, and I've got a video of this, of Albert Stubblebine admitting that Huxley was the head of MK Ultra. And so this kind of explains why Sidney Gottlieb's name is the only one not redacted on the whole thing. You know, every other name is redacted, but Sidney Gottlieb, and I couldn't figure this out. Why would they throw him under the bus like that? Well, once I started figuring out that they're protecting Huxley, I can see it makes sense.
Pretty
And so
nuts.
we see, yep, go ahead. Did you say something?
I just said that's pretty nuts.
Oh,
Like to
When I
see it like that.
when I see that human potential movement, I think Rogan on it, right?
yeah.
On it's the human optimization company,
Oh, he's on it.
based on absolute pseudoscience and fraud.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
human potential movement, the what they're selling, the products they're selling. That's what I think of when I see
Yep.
human potential. You know.
Yep. And I would say that that's the modern rendition of all of this. This is a very important part
Yeah.
for people to understand. We really want them to see what it looks like now
Yeah.
so that we can, in real time, start eliminating the things that are being most harmful to us. So you see, Huxley takes his first hit of mescaline from Humphrey Osmond. He's an MK Ultra doctor. We've got documentation and conversations between Huxley and all of the MK Ultra doctors. This is on the internet. You can go find it. He is communicating. He's making suggestions out on how best to do things. He's suggesting maybe giving these patients LSD before they're hypnotized, and maybe they're getting better results that way. And so this is why we think that Huxley. This is one reason why we think Huxley was the head of MK Ultra. We're gonna get into the video with Timothy Leary, where they all
Yes.
basically admit it, right? So
That's one of the most shocking things I've ever seen.
the
Yeah,
blood,
they're all in the
yeah.
same room. I
Dude,
know.
it's so nuts. Dwayne, you're such a badass.
Yeah,
So we're
dude, that
getting
was an
there. We're
unbelievable
getting there.
find.
So here's Thomas Mann's home, 1150 North San Remo. While they were building this house, he was living on Amalfi Drive, right across the street from Huxley, and they were taking walks with their dogs and their family up to see the construction while it was taking place. So these guys are very close.
Hmm.
Okay, and I mentioned the Weimar here, and that's all we're going to do for now is just mention it. So this is the book here.
Hmm.
It's 55 bucks, but you know, it is absolutely priceless some of the stuff that is in there. You're not going to find some of this stuff on mainstream. You have to buy the books. So he says that there are no statistics available for artists in other fields, but it is safe to call this one of the largest emigrations of writers and artists recorded in history. So you, again, back to Operation Paperclip, and this is all happening at this, same time.
That's what made me think of it. It's so
Yeah.
closely timed.
Just different aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the end of that article. Okay, now
Wow, man.
we'll get into the Huxley now.
I wonder, I just had a thought come to me, like, so I've been getting into the Bible and watching, clips of rabbis and things, and there's rabbis out there on YouTube just openly, gleefully talking about how in order for their Moshiach to return, for their Messiah to return, that America and the West and Europe need to be destroyed. So I'm wondering if some of these folks are coming in to America to subvert from within, to basically cause total insane chaos psychologically, and to get us to, like you say, that nudge us in a certain direction to affect our morality, our behavior. I mean, we're seeing it just right now with this trans agenda is on full. I mean, it's just absolutely insane what they're doing. I have a roommate. Again, this is how I learned through personal experience. Has a high school trans son. My mother worked in a pharmacy with a young woman who identified as a man, killed herself, at a young age. That came to me, that idea came to me, that all these sociologists, these professors, these thinkers show up here in this mass migration, and you have these rabbis just gleefully talking about how Western culture, Western civilization in America specifically needs to collapse in order for their Messiah to return.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
a thought that I had.
Well, you got very good intuition, because that's where we're going, and that really shows that is fact. That this is one way that they're doing it, through Hollywood movies, but they're infusing these guys are screenwriters and playwrights and poets, because we're talking, 1920. And so when they come here, they get involved in screenwriting for Hollywood, as does Huxley. He writes a screenplay for Alice in Wonderland and a couple other things. So he's deeply involved in that, and all of these guys are combining their skills together. So some are screenwriters, some are novelists. Adorno and Schoenberg worked together. Adorno and Mann worked together on Mann's novel Faust. And
Faust.
So, right?
Faust.
Now I'm going to stop there on that, because there is some more stuff that's coming in our next article that just is incredible with this Faust.
Wow.
The connections that are being made.
Yeah, drag queen story time. There you go.
Right. So we can see here already, I've got issues on our website. The pictures are missing. And Jan just got back to me. He says, I see that. Let me look into it. So we'll see if he can fix those as we go. But we'll just kind of go through this. And this is the question that I wanted to pose to everybody. How can we call Huxley a great prognosticator of our future world when he was so complicit in the design and execution of it? So he's beyond implicit to me. He is, and this is why I put him behind the wheel in that picture, because he is steering. He's the one driving the show. He's teaming up with these guys, and they are very effective, but he's really the one, moving the chess pieces.
That was a great image, by the way, with him driving the bus there.
Yeah, being like the super villain. And he kind of looks like the super villain from The Watchmen looks like him.
Right.
The dude that and funny enough is that guy, that super villain, wants to implode everything from the inside out to cause a fake scenario and everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's all connected.
it is. And so, for those that don't know, Huxley is Thomas Henry Huxley's nephew. That's, Darwin's bulldog, and his
Mm,
brother founded UNESCO. So he's a major player in the international movement as well. So, uh, what the amazing part for me here is, as we get closer to the Esalen and the human potential side of this all, was that all of these guys are at Sanary-sur-Mer because we're talking very early 30s. They're already getting out of Germany. They're seeing the rise of National Socialism, so they're vacating. And where do they go but Sanary-sur-Mer? And where is Huxley at this exact time writing A Brave New World but Sanary-sur-Mer? They're all hanging out there too. And so it is very much a coordinated move. They've obviously come up with some plans and a design while they're all at Sanary-sur-Mer, and they all come over within a few years of each other and start to push all of this degradation into society. So for me, that was a very profound discovery that not only did they show up in LA with Huxley, but they were already all together in the south of France
mm.
when Huxley was actually writing the novel of the world that we are now living in. So
But
Michael Murphy,
yeah,
yep, go ahead.
I was gonna say with Esalen too, um, they used to like do like naked sessions in the bathtub in the hot springs at night and stuff, and it makes me think of like a kind of an Epstein-esque sort of total great opportunity for them to run blackmail ops on anyone attending there as
Right.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an angle I didn't realize
There's
that.
like if you search Esalen, you could find all these images of these Silicon Valley magnates and Soviet Jews and even NASA astronauts would go to Esalen.
Yeah.
And you find all these compromising images of them naked with each other in hot springs and stuff like that. So it made me think, made me think of kind of like a recruitment process, and then they have a process for making sure that you cooperate.
Yeah, and I would say that they wouldn't miss an opportunity to do that.
Right.
If it was there, they would definitely capitalize on those things. And when you think about who went through Esalen, it's basically everybody. The Beatles made it super popular because they went there, but a lot of
Mm,
the 60s counterculture comes out of there too. And actually, the both of them are really inspired by Huxley novels. You know, the perennial philosophy, Doors of Perception. We all know that inspires Jim Morrison to name his band The Doors. This is where
yeah.
that comes from. And this here is his effect on Esalen actually was another realization for me. I was just like, wow, because when you go to the Esalen website, it shows that they just built a Huxley room on top of the old Huxley room in 2016. And when you look at the interviews and you read some of the books of the founders of Esalen, they talk glowingly, and they say, if I can find it here somewhere, might be getting ahead of myself, but one of the founders talks about how Huxley's the seminal inspiration for Esalen.
Ooh.
So we can see here Bertolt Brecht, Sanary-sur-Mer. He's talking about Thomas Mann's place. It's a tranquil white stuccoed Sanary house where the olive groves slope down to a deep azure sea. So the Palisades is very Mediterranean. It's um, it's nicknamed the Riviera, the Riviera. So
Yeah, Malfi Drive, you were saying, right? Isn't that what that Villa Aurora? Isn't that the road that it was on?
no, but they're all named after Italian cities by
Okay,
the designers that laid out the streets and everything. There we go.
I thought of Amalfi Coast when
Huon.
because you said Mediterranean. I think you said something about Amalfi Drive a little earlier and made me think of that.
Right. Yeah. So it's all connected to the Mediterranean. And they even say at the time that they were amazed when they got to California and just how similar it was uh, to the south of France and the Mediterranean Sea where he wrote A Brave New World. So we can see that Jan is behind the scenes here, fixing things as we go. And I'm forever grateful for that kind of activity right there. Thank you, Jan. Because I think that the pictures, are very important, as we can see Aldous Huxley's grandfather with his hand hidden.
Yep.
Many people know what that is. So here's
We're seeing that out in public more
Langer.
and more.
He's, the Villa Aurora at the time is really one of the only houses there. It's built as a demonstration home, and he buys it for $9,000 out of a bankruptcy. And man calls it a true castle by the sea. It's just an amazing place. And so this is where we get into the political salons, and all of these people are hanging out at Salka Vertel's, Thomas Mann's house, or the Villa Aurora. They're all having dinner with each other. And when you think about it, it totally makes sense, because very few of these people speak a word of English. So of course they're going to go and hang out with their friends from the Weimar that they knew previously, right? There's no real conspiracy here. This is just, human nature. The only problem is when you start to look into the backgrounds of all of these people and how they work together. So we can see Adorno, Horkheimer, we explained that they're at these meetings. And so what are they doing at these meetings? Right? We're going to get into that kind of stuff in our next articles, but it's starting to become pretty obvious. It's this plan that Andy was talking about earlier to sort of break apart America. And really what it is, the first thing that they had to do, and I talked about this in the Future Perfect 2, is they wanted to change our direction. They first had to remove us from our moorings and remove the anchor. So when I talk about cybernetics and the control of society with an ocean metaphor and how to steer a ship, that's what I'm talking about. So here's some interior shots of these places I just wanted to offer people, right, so that they can see.
That red door makes me a little curious.
Yeah, man, right away.
Right. And it still is there.
This pops.
Oh, and look at
Right?
that picture of it too.
It's
That's
almost
perfect.
Fabian-y. I'm not sure, but yeah, that red door is something. It's almost like a beacon.
Yeah.
In case you weren't really sure where you're going, or look for the red door. And so,
Man, the Doors of Perception was, it's still on my bookshelf. It's all tattered because I've probably read it like 4 or 5 times. It's not even it was probably 400 pages altogether with Heaven and Hell as well. His other short, whatever you want to call it, prose. But yeah, man, that cleared so many cobwebs. Yeah, man. Mine looks a little different, but it's both of them like that.
incredible, right? And I
That's
bought
pretty
it.
wild.
I bought it for $4.
Yeah,
So
I got mine.
everybody, man, go to your local bookstores and find this stuff. Grab it, keep
That's
it,
the
because
thing.
this is incredible artifacts.
So this is where I'd like Andy to talk on this too, because like all of us, like it's weird because like I didn't necessarily look at Huxley as like some sort of hero, but reading his stuff led me to believe kind of or have faith in individuals that I shouldn't have, right? It's like he's giving us a lot of tools, legitimate tools to think about in terms of your own psychology. I mean, at least that's my take of it. I don't feel like that part was necessarily untrue or misguided, which is the weird part. I don't like what parts of his work specifically have we identified anything specifically, or are we kind of just we have to go based on who they were and where they were and who was working together.
Right. Well, I would say,
It's so complex.
yeah. I had a point to answer to that.
Sorry.
It's somewhere in this article. Hopefully, can you ask me that question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Basically, I'm just saying that, as a very psychedelic person myself, like I got a ton out of a lot of these pioneers that has helped me over the years because of my experiences and how insane they were. And I don't feel like they've guided me towards anything negative or in a bad direction. However, I think I can see, how you could be led astray very easily. I think I say it often on the show that the newly awakened are the most easily fucked with or vulnerable people, and you can get taken into many different directions. So perhaps that's the angle. I don't know, but I'm just curious about, what you guys think of that, like the content itself.
Yeah.
If you've
So
gone there, I mean, I got a lot out of it.
the answer to
Tim
that
Leary
was
as well. Fucking the psychedelic experience with Tim Leary. I'm sure we could get into how controlled and bad it all was, yet it helped me make sense of my mind in a lot of ways. This is a weird dichotomy to be stuck in.
Well, when you look at what they say, the founders of Esalen, they say that it's the religion of no religion. So this is the kind of goal they're trying to. They recognize, whether we want to think positively or not of religion, they recognize that a lot of people were fully anchored to religion. It helps keep structure in our life, and so they knew that one thing was a major obstacle to their plan. So this is really why I think that the New Age was infused into our society. It was to break us from religion. They even say it that it is a religion of no religion. So you can think about what would result from that, okay? And we see Leary talking about in this video how a lot of the agents that were in Los Angeles were doing things in a cool and laid back way, where maybe in San Francisco they weren't quite doing it right. And so, this is what the 60s counterculture, we start to see the 60s counterculture coming out of here to influence another demographic. And really their targeted demographic was the youth.
Oh yeah.
Because these are the people that, are going to steer the future. So Huxley, he's a part of the Bloomsbury set. He's Club 1917, Future Perfect. We talk about how that group helped create the League of Nations and how they are all pacifists. Mabel Dodge Luhan, she's a Solinier. So I'm not sure how she fits in here, whether she's an inspiration for all of these people, but she is definitely creating the political salons in Greenwich Village. This is where Walter Lippmann frequented, and I think this is really where the idea of the House of Truth comes from, because the House of Truth itself is a political salon, and this is really where the idea of progressivism is launched, and why our definition of liberalism has changed so much is because of that. All at one place. So I invite people to go and check that article out too.
I just saw two names in there that jumped out at me. Can you scroll up a little?
Yes.
Krishnamurti.
Yes.
I literally always say this quote, and it still rings true. It is true. It is no measure of good mental health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
Yes.
Now, a
lot of truth in his work, man. So much truth in that man's work about
this stuff
consciousness.
Works. Yeah, this is how
like
this
what
stuff
if
works. Right?
What if this is such a problem? Like, what if I see the consciousness movement, and then I see the conspiracy movement, and they're kind of together, but then sometimes when we get into the nitty gritty, without discernment and without real research, they kind of bounce off each other like, whoa, we don't get along all of a sudden, because it's all of a sudden it's a lot of religion versus a lot of not so traditional religion anymore, but not necessarily like the collapse of the family or anything like that, just not necessarily Christian specific values or something like that, and this is a real interesting topic for me, I think, because this is my personal favorite, how this all fits together and how
I think
so
maybe where you were talking about earlier, like what's some of the downsides to like Huxley or the psychedelic experience or something, and I'm thinking of some of these characters and how, like, I'm sure you probably get into it, Duane, but like some of the leaders of like libertarianism and individualism and things like that, like if you get this idea, like, right, what was Leary's thing, the last frontier of freedom was like your own mind or something. If we become just too individualistic, then now we're vulnerable, where we have to find a balance between individualism and retaining our right to be free and to make our own choices, and also have that strength that sometimes religion, brings you. Community, like, we actually need other people, not only to
Yes.
feel good about ourselves, to have meaningful relationships, we need each other. And Andy, you and I have talked about our own personal experiences, 7 grams of psilocybin alone in the woods, walking into the woods by myself, not sure if I wanted to actually come out, you know what I mean? Like, really, this was middle August 2020, in the middle of all of that madness that 2020 brought us. Coming off of a bad drug addiction a few years ago, opiates, heroin, to go from that to like, actually, like 5 years ago, I was doing 30, 40, 60 pills at once, didn't care about the world. And now I'm like standing outside of vaccine clinics by myself with a bullhorn, like, because I actually give a shit about random people I don't even know. I mean, how does that happen? So psilocybin to me, really was an unbelievable tool. And I think they can be, but however, they're being pushed by folks like Huxley and Esselin and Rogan and Jones and Aubrey Marcus,
all of them,
all the wrong people.
And here's the thing: 10 years ago, 15 years ago, fuck, I'm aging. 20 years ago, I knew I wanted this to happen. I couldn't wait for everybody to get it, man, and psychedelics to become legal. And I still am not entirely against that because I'm obsessed with history, ancient history, and where we come from and what kind of cultures we actually come from. And a lot of the traditions that have been twisted and inverted and we don't know about. It's like, again, they use the truth to their own advantage. I don't know fucking how.
And that came out of Esalen too. There was a research paper that was called Mind War that came out of Esalen. And it was all about asymmetrical warfare for the 21st century.
Boom.
So Esalen was MK Ultra for the 21st century. That was what it was. Thought architecture, how to reprogram the subconscious mind, and they brought in the best minds. Influence from Huxley, money from Rockefeller, Ford, Packard, Carnegie Mellon, all of these types of folks.
Yeah,
they were literally targeting this information age, so you find names like Michael Aquino,
who also says a lot of interesting stuff about
absolutely.
Get down on.
There's a video of him saying how that Mind War research paper originated from Esalen, and it was specifically about using the truth as a weapon. Information wars, info wars, where we heard that term before, right? Information overload also was a specific tactic and strategy for them. I don't know about you all, but sometimes my brain has a difficult time, parsing all of this out, all the names, all the places. Not to say that it's not important, because it is.
Yeah, of course.
But they've look at our attention spans now, right?
Right.
Look at what they have done to the human mind, the average human mind, who doesn't even, I'm aware of what's being targeted at me and how they're trying to manipulate me. And I'm still like, oh man, like, I'm trying to parse it all out. And it's really difficult, but that, I think people like Joe Rogan, to bring it to the modern, and then we can kind of get back just real quick, and then to get back. I mean, this guy, the people, the kind of names that he's had on his show, the kind of ideas that he spreads, universal basic income as an example. That was actually a term that was developed and introduced by Alan Watts at Esalen.
Oh, really?
Universal basic income was first introduced by Alan Watts at Esalen. And then Joe Rogan brings on Andrew Yang and promotes universal basic income.
See, to me, the psyop in that, and maybe this may be a little out there for some people, but to me, the psyop is give the people a fake argument. Meaning, and I'm sure there's like smarter ways to describe what I'm saying here, but give them a premise that is false, but make them argue two different sides of that false premise. So they give us this idea of universal basic income, and they have us argue about it versus how we've done things or a different way of doing things, when in reality, we all know how bullshit the monetary system itself is and always has been from the very fucking beginning. So it's a fake premise to get people arguing about something just to accept that it's true, just to accept that it's inevitable. They'll argue for it or against it. That's how it works. And that's kind of terrifying when you think about the machine takeover that often gets argued about all the time when it comes to AI and technology. It's just being set up that it's happening. It's an inevitability, and we get to argue about it.
Yeah.
So it's a little depressing.
Yeah, just look at the two-party paradigm.
Exactly. The Hegelian dialectic strikes again. But
so there's actually three things that I want to talk about here before we move on. One is mushrooms opened my mind. I really credit that with me being able to see beyond what most people do. And then all of this is a technology itself. Okay, so they can use it for good or bad.
It's the
so
force.
When we're trying to figure this out, where Huxley went wrong, it's just a technology that they've chosen to weaponize. There's a lot of good in there, but you really have to know it to use it proper. And so they've just manipulated people by using it wrong. And then the third point is that Huxley, going all the way back to when Andy was talking at first, is that Huxley and his buddy Christopher Isherwood, who was hanging out at Weimar for the 3 years prior to coming to California, he wrote Goodbye Berlin, which turns into Liza Minnelli. It's one of those classic movies. It's really neo-noir, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but these turn into big movies is the point I'm trying to make. And they together, Huxley and Christopher Isherwood, wrote The Gay Libertarian. Okay, so when we're talking libertarians, you can see that this is, I mean, I haven't read this, but it's, an awfully strange title to be using.
Yeah.
And this is another point too, is that Christopher Isherwood and Huxley, his wife, and a lot of these people that are commingling are either bisexual, homosexual. They're really living the lifestyle that they're sort of encouraging everybody to participate in, and you can definitely see that at Esalen.
Free love.
I've even seen, because I watched a lot of the Esalen, and they even talk openly about having sex with everybody and who they want to have sex with, and they're, as soon as they get there, they're already identifying who they want, and so who knows really what's going on. But I would say that there was very little limitations as to what they were doing. I'm sure that there was, orgies and I'm speculating here, but I would say
you're making a lot of connections that make sense, like McKenna's archaic revival.
Yes, this is a key phrase, archaic revival. Jan Irvin talked a lot about this before he kind of went off the air, and so we've kind of picked up the baton there and uncovered all of this, and he's where I first heard that phrase archaic revival, and it goes back to Woodstock and
Hmm.
again Timothy Leary just living at the mansion there just outside of Woodstock, and you know the proximity to West Point military bases and all of these things that are going on.
Hmm.
So here I talk about Al Hubbard, the Hollywood Hospital. Some major American actors are there getting LSD treatment. I'm talking about Jim Morrison and his father, and how his father was the rear admiral of the USS Bonhomme Richard, the flagship of the 3rd Fleet Carrier Division during Tonkin Gulf incident, a very false flag event that initiated the Vietnam War. Now, Jim's dad was the leader on the Bonhomme Richard
Right.
ship. And strangely, man, they decommissioned that ship on the 2nd of July, 1971, and the next day, Jim Morrison dies. So,
Holy
you know,
shit.
you can,
Really? I did not know
yeah.
that detail.
So this is like, to me, he was decommissioned. And, you know, the rumors
Yeah.
of Morrison still being alive. I mean, when you look at where they say he's buried, I'm not sure, you know,
France.
a, a, a large man at 6 feet tall could fit in there. This is one of the things that kind of inspired it all. Yeah, there's a picture of him and his dad on the bridge of a ship, right?
Wow.
And so it is my theory.
Look at the haircut. Look at the haircut. He was a man-made creation.
Yeah,
Because,
dude,
yeah,
he
he's a
wasn't hippie. He
handsome
was
guy.
just dry. And you know, Oliver Stone's movie kind of makes it appear that way as well. That it almost makes him appear
That
as a
book.
spook because it starts with just Jim walking down the strip, just suddenly out of nowhere. He's just a ghost from nowhere.
Yeah, there's a scene in that movie too where he's in the shower. They've delayed a concert. Everybody's
Hmm.
waiting, and his handler, uh, whatever her name was, they actually have a quick conversation about his parents, and it sets him off. So
Oh,
it's
yeah, the witchy,
speculation.
the
But I would say that, you know, Jim Morrison served his purpose and
mhm.
moved on, just as if you had a military objective and you accomplished it and you went on to something else. That's really how I feel about it. Whether I can ever prove that or whether that is ever exposed as true, we don't know.
Total
But
speculation.
yeah,
Rush Limbaugh. The theory. There is a
Is
theory
he's
out there.
Jim Morrison?
This is total.
uh,
Conspiracy world
That's awesome.
theorizing, but some folks have gathered up a theory that
Oh, that's
Morrison is
fantastic.
wow,
Limbaugh.
That's
I've
great.
never heard that either.
There is a there's it, there's a little bit there. I'll say I'm not
Really,
making any claims here.
I'll
This
look
is
into it.
not making any
I'll
claims
I'll have
here,
to go
but
look at that
I'm
because we
starting
can
to
consider,
realize that this place isn't exactly
Yeah.
yeah,
When you
and
start seeing like
how
government
they
agents videotaped like putting on these like special undercover masks and stuff like that and fooling the president and stuff like that with how great the mask technology is. It's like, yeah, oh shit, this isn't sci-fi and this isn't necessarily conspiracy theory.
mhm. And so to our viewers, I would say that as we speculate like this is healthy. I think that for us to be able to consider things without accepting them, this is really a great trait of, you know, deductive mind or somebody that's trying to be reasonable and work our way through this, navigate through our world. I think that we need to consider a lot of things and figure out whether we accept them going forward.
Hmm.
So, you know, don't be afraid to speculate. Don't be afraid to consider things. And so I find that, you know, there are certain topics that if you even engage with people, that they show this, that they don't have this trait. They don't want to talk and consider things. They would rather call you 100 other names before they would consider whatever it is that you're sort of trying to get them to talk about or to think about.
Hmm.
And so one last thought here on Huxley before we get to this, or on Morrison, before we get to this lower video here, is, you know, Freud is one of the key guys that they use. It's Marx, Hegel, and Freud. And
Hmm.
so I think this part right here, you know, Morrison introduces the Oedipal complex to a whole new generation, and this is it's about killing your father and raping your mother, having sex with your mother.
Hmm.
And it's very shocking. Back in the day, people were just totally in outrage over this. And so I put the quote in from the song The End, and where he talks about the killer awoke before dawn and put his boots on. And when you listen to all of that, it's the introduction of the Oedipal complex, because he kills his father, says that he wants to kill him, and then leaves the conclusion open like a meme. Mother, I want to, and it's as if they are explaining this event through the music. When you go back and listen to the
Yep.
song, it really makes a lot of
Dude,
sense.
you're
They leave
blowing my mind.
they leave the most damning part left up to the mind. They
Yep.
do this a lot. A lot of these guys, like in a movie, when a couple goes to a motel room and the door closes and then it opens again and a do not disturb sign goes on the door and it closes, that leaves your mind to run
Right.
and imagine what it is. And just like a killer that's not seen is the most scary because it really plays to each individual that's watching it. This is how
Hmm.
they kind of got around some of these laws. There was a Hays Code. And so because of all of the movies were just so awful and ask and broaching subjects that were taboo, lesbianism and all of these things, and they were bringing them into the movies and influencing people, and so they came out with this Hays Code, and they just didn't want anything to demoralize the American public, but they found ways to get around it, and this is one of them where they just hang the it's an example of how they do it. They hang the do not disturb sign, and then everybody knows what's happening. They imply these things. So for those that don't know, many of these people were hanging out in Laurel Canyon, and he just showed weird scenes inside Laurel Canyon,
Yeah,
and
weird
it goes
scenes,
deep
man.
into that. Yeah, and so we're not going to play this video, but I encourage everybody to go. It's got all of the MK Ultra doctors sitting here, plus Johnny Appleseed, the guy that
We
was.
could play a little if you want. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
copywritten, but we could try if you want to.
Can you
If you
hear that?
guys, no, actually, we can't.
Yeah, so I might
So
have it
maybe
here.
not.
I think we're just gonna.
But go to bulletproofpub.com to find
Definitely.
this video.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
an
weird.
hour
He said,
long.
is that Captain Trips right next to him? Or is that
Yes.
a,
Yep.
yeah, that is him.
That's Al Hubbard, and then Oscar Janiker's there, and Humphrey Osmond's there, and some of the admissions that they make in this video will blow your mind. There's probably 10 bombs in there.
Yeah. Can you give the audience just a little treat? Yeah. What's one of
Yeah.
them?
Well, they say, they talk about the agents in Los Angeles. Leary uses the word cell, and one of the doctors interrupts him and says, can we not use cell? And it's a very open discussion about how they influenced um, the 60s counterculture. And
Mm.
yeah, I mean, there's just some amazing admissions in there. And definitely it is a must watch for everybody. So here we get Huxley inspiring Esalen and the human potential movement. It is no secret that Huxley was a seminal inspiration for Esalen and the infusion of Hindu mysticism in the United States. And it's through his perennial philosophy, and it doesn't create the New Age movement, but it really, rejuvenates it and kicks it into gear. Uh, a lot of these exhilarator are intelligentsia. So,
Mm.
the definition of that actually is scholars and intellects teaming up and, creating circumstances. So, there's connections there. A lot of these guys end up working in uh, U.S. intelligence. They're working
Mhm.
in propaganda divisions. They're creating weaponry. They're spreading propaganda. So we see a total intelligence overlay. And so some of these key guys, Ken Kesey, he wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Allen Ginsberg, Terence McKenna, Timothy Leary, Henry Luce, Gordon Wasson, who was the JP Morgan Vice President of Public Relations of all things, and the
Oh,
founder
yeah.
of
And
the
we got
Magic
receipts on
Mushroom.
him. We got receipts from the CIA on that guy.
Yes. Yes, and so they put out a Life magazine article on the founding of the magic mushroom, and it's
Mhm.
simply it's a network. They've all teamed up to. This is really how propaganda works. We've talked about this, I think, before, how propaganda needs two pillars. One's an institution, and the other's information. You need a place to congregate, and then another to disseminate. So a lot of these people are editors of like the Harvard Law Review or the Harvard Crimson, or they end up becoming editors of major American um, newspapers, journals, quarterlies, magazines. A lot of them writing for Foreign Affairs. A lot of them are CFR members, and Henry Luce is a major part of this. And we see the connections with Charles Douglas Jackson, C.D. Jackson. He's another guy that everybody needs to look into. He's He's a head of the psychological department of the American government, and
Hmm.
he's one that the Zapruder film goes to because they give it to Time Life and it gets put into a vault. When that first happens, nobody ever saw the moving film of the JFK murder like we do today, and we're so familiar with. They only published still shots, and so that's really where they edited. And we've never really seen the true JFK murder the way it was meant to be. They took frames out,
Hmm.
and he never really released it. It went into a vault and never came out.
Right.
So it's
Just like,
Zapruder, he was a Zionist too, wasn't he? Abraham, wasn't his name Abraham?
I don't know.
Zapruder.
Zapruder, yeah, he was a Zionist.
Yeah, I would say that he's definitely a part of this. He wasn't just a guy standing there
Yeah,
randomly and just happened to
Which,
catch
just
absolutely.
for everybody listening that may not realize this yet, Zionism is clearly a political situation, not a religious situation.
right.
Just look into it. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah. And so I've just offered one page out of the Time Life. There's several. If anybody wants them, I can offer them. There's about 9 pages or so, and it explains his whole trip into there. You can see there's a picture of him there.
Hmm.
And so we also see the rollout through Playboy magazine and a whole bunch of magazines. And so who's the targeted demographic of a Playboy magazine but young men? And so a lot of people all get involved in this magic mushroom. A lot of people make exoduses down to Mexico to have these religious experiences.
Hell yeah.
And it's all inspired through reading Playboy and Time magazine, and the media really pushes it and promotes it.
Hmm. But I mean, can we disregard the fact that cultures have been doing those practices for thousands of years and these people exposed more people to them? Like where where this conversation, I don't like we may like maybe that's the next conversation with even a bigger group. I don't know.
Right.
What do you think of that, Andy?
Um, yeah, it's interesting to think about.
Like are we like
Because
I don't want to I don't know. It feels like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. With like, or at least, like I see all the nuances that you guys that you're showing here.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is like to really get the point to the biggest group of people, we're gonna have to contend with these kind of questions because that's one of my questions. Like, not only did I, read a lot of these people, but like I've had these experiences as you guys have had these experiences. I know that I'm not trying to like reiterate what we already discussed, but it's like a lot of these points kind of lead to like, you mentioned Hinduism. There's a lot of good there too. So like the fact that it was kind of brought in further, like, are we simply contending with a Christian viewpoint here?
Well, I don't, I think it's an attack on Christianity for sure. I think,
Hmm. I mean, I would agree. Yeah. I mean, a lot of these atheist scientists were like rock stars when I was in my young 20s. I see that. I do. I don't know. Am I taking this is it a
well,
different conversation?
again, we are prefacing everything that we say with, that this is a technology and it can be used for good or bad.
Yeah.
And we must be educated on things that we're going to sort of especially put into ourselves that we're going to consume. And so I am certainly not denouncing any of this. the Hinduism, because you're right. There's a lot there that can keep us peaceful, that can help us, stay structured, just as Christianity would.
Mm,
Uh, but it's a technology, just like anything else, and they can use it to manipulate. And I would also say that this is an open-ended investigation. Those are the
yeah,
answers that we're looking for too. You know,
absolutely. Yeah,
so
I just wanted to really kind of bring it there because
yeah,
I feel like this is where I'm assuming this is where a lot of the confusion comes from in the comments when you're talking about getting
yeah,
a lot of hate or misunderstanding or ad hominem attacks.
yeah.
Um, I'm trying to understand this too a little bit, because I see all the evil seething through all this. And I've had the same question, the same problem for years. And yeah, it's a really tricky one.
Okay, so I would go back to cybernetics here and what that means in the steering of a ship. So
Mm-hmm.
they identified that they wanted to change our direction of that ship, but they
Yeah.
knew before they could set sail, they had to remove anchors and our moorings and some of those things. And I'm calling them cleavages in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
because we depend on these things, and so there again we can get into all the specific things that we hold valuable to our Western culture,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can specifically remove the parts that we don't want and keep the parts that we do, so we do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is one of the major considerations for us, and why we want to just present the information. This is unbiased by any authority.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just giving the facts. And I certainly, like my farm, we grow the food, but I don't want to feed anybody. We put it on the shelf, and they pick it up and eat it, and I get out of the way. And so this is really how we approach this information too. I'm just uncovering this and presenting it as unbiased as I possibly can. Of course, I have biases. Of course, there are things that I see that are detrimental. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, there are things about Huxley I do not like.
Yeah.
And so we all got to come to grips with some things, and consider, the reality of all of this. We've had, you know, when we go back to the Paris Peace Conference, we've had over 100 years of hindsight. So
Yeah.
really, and a lot of it isn't even left to opinion. We can just lay out the facts and look at where we are. And,
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing, and Huxley is a major part of it, but it is only a part. And for anybody that's kind of coming loose right now from their love for Huxley, you know, I'm with you. There's a lot of my heroes are gone too,
Yeah.
and I'm careful not to throw everything out until I fully consider everything. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Best
this comes from
advice.
an educated opinion, all of this, and that's all I would say. That it's a technology and it can be used for good or bad. You know,
No, I like that. I did. Yeah, I like that you came back to that. And you're right. And the whole idea of using truth as a weapon, it fits into this as well.
yeah, that's
Um,
just one thing how they weaponize things against us. And
yeah,
it goes into language, philosophy, theology, schools of thought. And so the smarter we are, the more knowledgeable we are, the less we're going to get fooled. And so here's a
right.
great example. Okay. Jordan Peterson.
Yeah,
Okay. He says the greatest antidote to a tyrannical government is a well developed individual. So I take that to heart. I'm like, yes. And so he inspired me into a lot of what you see that I've been
hmm,
producing. Jordan Peterson
right.
inspired me in a major way.
Yeah,
And
I looked up to him too for a little bit. I thought he was kind of like a
I made my bed
good,
because of Jordan.
right,
right, right. Like
12
right.
rules for life,
yeah,
man.
he's
Yeah,
saying good things to young
Very
men and
basic though.
people.
You know,
yes.
to look at his trajectory, I totally agree with that, right? The
But let's
best
yeah, hold
opposition
on.
to a tyrannical government is what was the term you said?
Well, a well-developed
Well,
individual is a
yeah.
perfect antidote to a tyrannical government. Now, that's the exact quote that he said
Yeah.
on Joe Rogan about 4 years ago, and that really just set me off in the direction that we've gone, because I wanted to find meaning and purpose, and the key word there is purpose. You go
Hmm.
back to Future Perfect Article 2, and Norbert Wiener's discovery of the feedback loop. It was called behavior, purpose, and teleology. and that is the study of purpose. So you go and you look at the Theseus, the rat or the mouse that they put in the maze. He has a purpose, and that is to find the cheese. And when you have a purpose, you can be manipulated. So yes, Jordan Peterson has totally influenced me. I took his writer's course. I owe a lot to that guy, but now we see he's turning. We
Right.
see who he's starting to affiliate with. We see some of the imagery that I've seen lately in the last month or so of his advertising. He's dark. He's far darker now.
Yes,
And so he's a great example. You just have
he
to be
is.
careful of what you take and what you don't. And so when you understand the trivium and you get to know logical fallacies, these are great defense mechanisms. It's like the intellectual taekwondo. You
Mm,
have you have defense mechanisms that help you steer, and then you have the ability through grammar, logic, and rhetoric to ask the proper questions.
mhm.
Okay, so I get it can be complicated, and this is probably the final point I want to make before we finish this conclusion is that uh, uh, Paul Felix Lazarsfeld is one of these emigres that comes over on Rockefeller money, and he leads the Princeton Radio Research Project, and he coins the term narcotizing dysfunction, and this is where they recognize that inundating everybody with uh, conflicting information and lots of it paralyzes them into inaction. And so this
Mm,
is what we see that the modern day is just the fullest imagination extended of that, where people just watch TV and they get fed information, and that's replaced action.
right.
Okay, and so this is deliberate by them. Everybody look into the Princeton Radio Research Project. Again, the word research. This is where they researched our behaviors in radio listening before the TV was even around.
Right.
They had this figured out a long time
Oh
ago.
man, I bet we could go deep into like the War of the Worlds and
Yep,
how
The moon landing.
that's where my
well,
next
sure,
article's
sure.
going.
But the
Yeah,
War of the Worlds like being broadcast and everybody, oh yeah, that story that where everybody thought it was real, that now starting to sound like an experiment on purpose.
it's fully, and when you look at who's involved there, it's
Right.
Lazarus, but it's H.G. Wells is there and
Right.
he's a Canadian, right? So it becomes pretty obvious when you have a conceptual idea of everything. You can see how these individual events really help shape and steer.
Right.
And so,
Cybernize.
yeah. And so here's in my conclusion, I say little remains to be said. What we witness is an all-out frontal assault on all aspects of Western society, all instituted at the same time, and the whole agenda manipulated by the very author of A Brave New World. And so that's where I would say that we are at with this.
Wow. So we're kind of putting Huxley in the main driver's seat. And
Of this
that's
aspect of it. Yep.
yeah. And I think yeah, of this aspect, just like one little thing. And
Yeah.
this
And this is
is hard to deny. If people can go to the website and look at all this information, it's right in front of us. It's
Yeah, and
undeniable.
they talk about California, Los Angeles being a laboratory. I've got footage of Timothy Leary being introduced by his son, and he does a stand-up routine. And this is, probably 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Hmm.
It was well after the 60s counterculture. And he talks about how they were experimenting on Los Angeles because Los Angeles was the place of the cool and hip. And so that it was easier for everybody around America and in the West to follow what was going on in LA. We see today even how, Hollywood stars are idols
Hmm.
and societal influencers, shapers of everybody's thought, right? We see commercials with LeBron James promoting McDonald's, and it's all part of it. So
Wow.
we've got Huxley, Al Hubbard, the guy that's in that black and white video. He's the shorter guy on the right, and Gerald Hurd, who is really one of those other founders we haven't mentioned here, but he's huge in the human potential movement. Him and Huxley come to LA together. And so there's a pretty incriminating picture there. We've got the
Hmm.
Johnny Appleseed of LSD standing in California sun with Huxley and Hurd.
Wow.
So
Just
Yeah,
have a wealth of primary source materials.
yeah. Because, first of all, I want to protect my mind, right?
Yeah,
It's like putting on the oxygen for you first and then taking care of your baby if the plane's going down. This is
right.
really what's inspired me is to protect myself and my family, those closest to me, so they're the first to get this, right?
Mm,
So that and really, this is the kind of information that's helped us thrive.
hmm.
Just
Oh,
know how
absolutely.
the world works. And it's not Woodrow Wilson that's writing the 14 points that become the League of Nations. It's actually all of these social engineers, the
Right.
high level grand strategists that are creating it. And so that whole mechanism becomes an entering wedge and creates, the world that we have today.
This is incredible. And this,
Huxley.
again, this is an ongoing living research project that you're conducting, and
Yep.
as Andy and I are doing our own work, it eventually it's got to come together, you know.
Yeah. And let,
I really feel like, I asked you in the very beginning of part one was who put these social engineers all in the same room, right?
Mhm.
And yeah,
This is
Huxley could be considered a big part of it, right? But from the very beginning, we know a lot of you out there listening know or watching, this story goes far beyond the 20th century into the 19th and 18th and far beyond that. So this is a piece, but this is a recent piece. This is something that's in our lifetimes, stories that we grew up on from our parents and our grandparents talking about the world. And this is flipping it all on its head.
Yeah, and I would take this opportunity that you reminded me to thank the many people that are in behind the scenes working for us. We're not paying anybody, but we are getting inundated with information and and
Mhm.
and leading us into some more incredible areas. You know, there's a lot of people getting on board and they're working in behind the scenes. They don't really want to be identified, but they love doing research and they see what we're doing, so they're starting to contribute. And I really want to just say thanks to all of those people. You guys know who you are. You're on Facebook with me, and I just really appreciate all of that because it shows that there's a concerted effort and interest in righting all of this wrong.
Mhm.
And so I invite everybody to come along with us on this open-ended investigation. Let's discover our reality and do it in a way that we can identify specifically what's hurt us most and remove it and leave that which benefits, our society and us.
Good words, good words. Andy, you got anything for us?
I wanted to touch base on just kind of what you guys think. I think it was a article. I think it might have been written by Jan Irvin. Um, I got into a lot of this type of research through him. Not so sure what I think about him now, going on Alex Jones, and I think he's kind of taken a turn. But
Well, he's
um,
disappeared.
what's that?
He's disappeared.
Yeah,
And a lot
yeah.
of people credit myself for doing that. We had an epic battle over about a month, and we had phone conversations. I talked to Jan Urban, and I'll say this right now, man, that he really introduced this stuff to me too. And so even though him and I aren't friends anymore and he's not really doing a lot, we owe a lot to that work. That
Right.
General Stubblebine quote is going to be an incredible artifact if we were to win this.
Mhm.
So yeah, sorry to interrupt there.
Nah, no worries. But he highlighted something. I think the article was called like "What's in a Name,"
Yep.
and he was talking about, how did they arrive at hallucinogen or psychedelic, and really he came up with a term that he said would be more appropriate, and I agreed with this. Suggestogen.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So we see, especially now, right? If we're talking about now and what we've seen, the kind of conversations that take place about these different substances that can give us these, um, maybe they can give us some peace, they can give us some understanding, they can blow our minds open, and they can help bring healing to a a broken sort of person who's in a bad state of mind, right? Who's depressed, who's dark, who's down, who's tried it all. Now, if we see the kind of conversations that are taking place, I mean, you see people like Joe Rogan taking mushrooms on his podcast and trying to get people that don't even want to take them,
Yeah, he's a bad.
comedians
Oh,
and stuff, and he's just take a mushroom, right? And we hear these people describe the types of experiences you're supposed to have,
right.
right? Even when we talk about these things, right? It's like we kind of talk
sacred.
about there, yeah, right. I think it's so I mean, I struggle with this because it's something that really helped me so much, and I don't think I'd be where I'm at today, standing outside of vaccine clinics by myself.
Yeah, I totally
I don't
agree.
think I'd be where I'm at to have the kind of strength
I
to
agree.
like stand up in the face of all this, because it's not easy to like put yourself out there, to start a podcast, to show the world what's inside of your mind, just free flowing. It's not easy to do that. And but I think we really need to be careful, because that process of altering your mind with these substances, our minds are I mean, they're so resilient and strong and able to take on so much, but yet they're so fragile
Mm-hmm.
at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. It's amazing to think
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
how like you can overcome. Like I had a friend, he runs a business up here in Asheville, North Carolina, chocolate business, was telling me, I was kind of just having a discussion with him about some circumstances that I was struggling with, personal circumstances, and he told me, he said something about the CIA and all these types of MK Ultra experiments, and really trying to find those inner gears and what works and what doesn't. He was saying that there was documents that said when an individual fully accepts the circumstances of their situation, like really deeply beyond measure accepts their circumstances, they become like superhuman.
Right.
So
And
to
I agree.
so to think about how the mind can be that powerful and that
Mm-hmm.
resilient and that amazing, but at the
Well,
same time so fragile, where somebody
Vulnerable.
could have one of these experiences and take these substances after I mean, there's if you
And then you get
search
the
on
handlers. Then you get the handlers coming in,
if you
right?
search on Facebook, there are so many young people that are like just willy-nilly starting DMT groups and all
Yeah.
these stuff, and they're the way that they talk about this stuff, they openly talk about smoking DMT in comment sections. I remember I got pulled into a group, and because I was like, you know, I had had some experience with mushrooms. So hearing that all these conversations and podcasts about DMT and this and that, I'm seeing these young, really young, like people doing this so recklessly.
Mm.
And I remember
mhm.
I had a friend in 2020 told me about his brother had a best friend somewhere in California, took 100 hits of acid, a whole sheet,
Mm.
and he is in a padded room permanently, and he thinks he's a glass of orange juice. And if he somebody pushes him over, then he's gonna die. Like this is a
Oh,
21-year-old,
Yeah.
to
wow.
think about that. So like for listeners and viewers out there, I just wanted to kind of bring that up because you need to be careful. Your
Right.
mind it's very powerful and very capable and amazing and beautiful. However, you need to be careful.
Mhm.
And you need to be careful of people like Joe Rogan and
Mm.
Aubrey Marcus and
Yeah.
all of those folks that run in those circles. You
Sadhguru.
Sadhguru telling people
Oh,
to get vaccinated.
oh
All
yeah.
these kinds of different people that are being promoted. If it's being promoted by the algorithm to
That's it.
you,
Right.
don't be very careful.
That's
Be
the tough
very-
part. You listen to Robert Malone get up there and talk like we, the coalition against the pharma industry, and you're like, why is this being promoted? I don't know what's happening.
All the other vaccines are great, but this one's not so great.
Yeah, and I still really like traceability and tracking. My CIA friends tell me it's a really good thing. No, it's good. It's good. Now the Joe Rogan thing, you brought up a really good point, Andy, because like, uh, yeah, man, I have accidentally, without knowing any better, when I was younger, done psychedelics at like a party kind of scenario. Other than that, it's always been like very sacred and important to do it with the right people, if any, the right place and all that, because there is great experience and truth in it. But Joe Rogan being, you know, and a literal influencer, not just some influencer and using that word, like a huge influence on the youth and unfortunately the adults of America and the world, to turn that into I guess even like cannabis, turning it into like something you can just pass around and do during interviews and shit, and kind of give that message. It's kind of yeah, it's pretty unfortunate to see that, you know what I mean? It's kind of turning it into, and even cannabis, not to go off on too much of that tear, but like cannabis should be more of a sacred thing. I don't do it that way at all, but I should, you know, we all like that. It's maybe that was normalized too in that situation. So this is all fitting together. There's a million pieces to this friggin' story. Oh, you guys want to say anything else? We are on we're on 2 hours and 33 minutes right now.
Yeah, I would say about Rogan, and maybe we got maybe 5 more minutes.
Sure.
But I would say that Rogan is fulfilling the role that Lippman did. He's an entering wedge. He's really the modern rendition of a social influencer. It's pretty obvious now
Yeah.
that, he's sort of paid to do what he does. And, back to your point about people's mental health and being careful, I would say that, and also that, understanding how powerful we are. What are they targeting but our mind? So they understand the power we have if we actually engage. And so this should inspire everybody to do their best to become a well-developed individual, to learn logical fallacy, because once you know that, you're never fooled again. And people like Rogan, you can consider in their true light. And I'll go back to one of the things I remember from taking mushrooms, man, was this is a specific moment in my life that was very profound. But I took mushrooms and I was just outside in my backyard in the sun and just enjoying nature. And I was just overwhelmed by it all. And I remember a basil plant, and it was sitting there, but it was like reaching for the sun. And so it really changed my perspective. Obviously, that's what they all grow towards the sun, but it was just vibrating. And in that moment, I could really feel nature. And Leary talks about set and setting being very important. So where you are and who you're with. So he really speaks to this vulnerability that we have. So those are all considerations. I'm not going to tell somebody to take mushrooms because I know that there is some downside. Everybody's different. I have a story from my past of a friend that did similar things. They took mushrooms and LSD they tried to see how many days in a row they could do it. And I remember the summer, and we were still in high school. It was probably grade 11. And we would see these two buddies of ours driving around in their Suzuki Samurai, high on whatever, and the rest of us were at the beach. But they were on a trip. Now, one of those guys is in jail for a very horrific murder.
Oh,
now,
Jesus.
I'm not sure how much of this had influence. He was already a little bit when we were kids, but this is the risk that we take when we sort of dive into these things, especially when we don't respect them.
Yes.
And so a lot of my friends, we respected it. but these guys just wanted to see how far they could push it. And so that really affected their life going into the future. So this is
Right.
why I stopped short of saying, yeah, everybody take it, even though
Yeah.
it had so much influence on me and really did open my eyes.
Hmm.
So
I totally agree. And I do you we're both everybody's speaking here to something that keeps bringing this to my mind. This idea that it's like the two evils pretending to be the good and bad, or this fake setup, right? That's this because it's like you actually kind of do have these two groups where one group seems to want to keep it all in the hands of the few, this very powerful information, right? And then there's the other group that wants to let it all out of the bag and rule in that way in some capacity. And it seems like use psychedelics as that. Like it's all suppressed, all the knowledge, all the interesting spiritual knowledge that comes with it, all of that suppressed for a long time by the powers that be. Now the powers that be are letting it all out. And it's interesting how it's all part of it. I don't know. It's really interesting. But
and I
yeah.
don't have answers for that. This is
No, but that's just
this is
for
why
everybody
this
to.
is we really encourage everybody to come along with us on this journey and
Yeah,
correct us as we go, and let's make this a community effort. And we're getting contacted by a lot of people that have specific interests in research, and they're uncovering things that are related to us. And when we go back to the Macy conferences, it was interdisciplinary. So they had doctors of every type, and they would all present, and then all the other doctors would take that information and then show how it related to their expertise. And so I
mm-hmm,
think that is key for us to now do. Both you guys have uh, a knowledge that I don't have, and I have a knowledge that some other people don't have. And so we've got to connect the past with today. And so we're encouraging everybody to come help us. If there's an expertise or an area of history or research that if you find could help us, definitely put us in touch with it. We're gonna, roll it around in our hands like we do all artifacts and see how this relates to everything. And I think this is how we win, is if we all
absolutely.
get interested in this and really push forward. And that's what we're trying to do, is really push this into the mainstream and show this reality. We're not making anything up, but it is a history that most people don't know. So,
That's
you
right.
know,
Well, I think you're doing a really great job over there at bulletproofpub.com. Duane, thank you so much again for joining us on this epic series that we've been doing. Andy, Girard, thank you so much for joining us on this. And I want to bring us all together again, probably, and do more of these. That would be really fun. I think it would be really educational for all of us, and maybe
yeah,
bring some other good people into the fold.
I think we need
But yeah,
education.
Andy, please tell the audience where they could find you.
Well, somehow still on YouTube. I am in a timeout right now because I said COVID vaccine victims, all in that order, on a video. COVIDvaccinevictims.com actually is what I said, and the video got deleted. So still on YouTube. My channel is called Go Within to Get Out. I'm on Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute, all the places. Facebook, you can find me at Andy Girard. Duane and I communicate on there quite regularly. But yeah, just really happy to be here today, guys. Thanks for that presentation, Duane. I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and I want to expose the modern aspect of this, like drawing out from Esalen. Esalen really intrigues me because of my experience with mushrooms, what it did for me, how amazing it was, but also finding it struggle to how do I communicate to my audience without being reckless, because in the beginning I was just I was completely reckless. I thought the sky was falling. It kind of was
A
in
little bit, a little
2020.
bit.
I didn't have anybody to talk to. My family and friends thought I was nuts, and I've made so many changes. Used to be a sports fan, used to watch TV. I threw my television away, and I finally understand why my family and friends think I'm crazy, just because it's a huge shift. It was a huge shift in my thinking, my behavior, the kind of things I would be interested in and talk about. But yeah, I was a little reckless, I would say, in 2020. But I'm a different man. I'm a better man today for having endured all that. I've met so many amazing people like yourselves, and I'm just trying to spread love, compassion in the world, and give a voice to the voiceless out there, and try and uncover and seek the truth, because we don't have a truth community. We have a seeking truth community. Nobody's got a monopoly over here,
Damn right.
Yeah, and
So-
I would just say this in closing. It's been awesome to meet both of you guys. Appreciate both of your passions for finding out what's really going on. You can find me at The History of Propaganda on YouTube. I'm still there too, for whatever reason.
A
And at
lot of good
bulletproof.com.
videos there. And yeah, bulletproofpub.com. All right, Duane, Andy, everybody listening and watching, this was awesome. And yeah, look forward to more.
Awesome.
See you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Watch this video get censored from YouTube for my last.
Let's hope not. It'll also be up on Odyssey and Rockfin. So, all right.
Later, guys.
Cheers, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Deep Share Podcast. If you want to hear more, then hit that subscribe button. Follow me on all the social places. And remember, think for yourself, but don't always believe what you think. Till next time.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, that's hysteria. Enough, I get the point.
You have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone.
What do we know? What do we know? If I know what we know, then I can tell you what we know, and if someone else knows, okay? I mean...